Drugs are cool. Drugs are fun. And I'm not just saying that. Millions of Americans want to buy illegal drugs, and the illegality of them is not going to stop them. According to a recent report from the Rand Corporation, in 2016 alone, U.S. citizens spent $150 billion on cannabis, cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamines. So what's up, guys? I'm Bucky Dillon of House Liberty Revolt, friend to most, survivor of Antifa doxing and of COVID-19, lover of a good time, acting chairman of the Weld County Libertarians, and a guy who does not think that anyone should be violently arrested for buying a BJ while high on cocaine.
I have never heard anyone self-flagellate themselves. Okay, guys, that is Bucky Dillon.
Hey, what's up, y'all?
I am Kevin LaRusso, and I'm just a dude, and also acting chair of Larimer. So we're bringing that up because first and foremost, before we get into anything else going on today, there are massive elections, local elections going on next week. We have the major one. I got asked on an interview yesterday by Mr. Jimmy Songenberger about what can parents do about what's going on in our colleges and stuff. And my answer is you have to teach your kids early about critical thinking, which means you have to be actively involved in their early education. That means being on the school boards of your local district. If you think something's going on, that is the best way possible that you can take the power back. And speaking of
we got to take the power back.
Speaking of that, we have massive elections where there are multiple seats up in Larimer and Weld County on their school boards and their various school boards, Pruder Valley, Thompson River Valley, all those kinds of things. So just unfortunately, us as the Libertarians, we are brand new to this. We don't have a very robust voting guide available yet. However, I would still recommend checking out your local Republican Party. They are going to have a list that we basically agree on. However, when
for a lot of things.
For a lot of things, at the very minimum, they will be their recommendations for the school board would be most likely the same as ours. But I would check it out for yourself. They'll have the data there. But these local elections are critical. They are how we take the power back. And if you want to know why the power has left and why it seems that people are more alienated by their politicians than ever right now, it's because we're not involved on the local level. So we have elections coming up. Vote by mail, go in person. It doesn't matter. Just vote. Take the time to look up the issues. It's not a lot.
Go to freestatecolorado.com.
Yeah.
Brandon Work does tremendous work.
Yeah, Brandon Work has a good voting guide on this. freestatecolorado.com. It is a wonderful resource for this kind of stuff. And again,
I'll put that in the link down below. If you're watching on the live stream, what's up, Janine? Always great to have you. Guys, facebook.com/Liberty Revolt Media. You can join the conversation in the chat.
Yeah. So, but yeah, to get to the issue that we're talking about today. So like those of you who know me personally, probably not many of you listening, but they're, my friends, they know my stance on drugs, right? The best option is legalization with production coming from certified pharmaceutical companies rather than aftermarket, black market, forests in Nicaragua and Colombia and stuff like that. Because if you actually address the drug issue, one of the big reasons why people are paying attention to it right now is the epidemic of fentanyl getting into our drugs, getting into the street drugs, cocaine and stuff. Recently, there was a party in Hollywood where there were 4 comedians that did cocaine and like 3 of them died because it was laced with fentanyl. There's a lot of celebrities that are dying with Mac Miller, Prince. There's a lot of celebrities dying from this, but they are just the tip of the iceberg. They are just representing the actual crisis that is going on.
Oh, we have a real crisis.
We had 93,000 people in 2019 die of drug overdoses, and that number has only gone up during COVID in 2020 and 2021.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Like, I don't think there's anything inherently immoral about doing cocaine, but the reason that I would not purchase it is because I'm concerned about the people who are profiting off of it and how it got to me.
Yeah, like all right now, I tell every college kid, like, dude, look, I wish I could tell you to live the full college experience, give every drug a try, because
but you don't know if there was a little girl who was forced to smuggle it in some obscene way.
Yeah, no, it's not. Yeah, it's not just about the human trafficking side that goes into it. It's also just about the fact that now what's going on right now is you have drug dealers that are cutting fentanyl into their product and just rapidly killing people. The drugs themselves are incredibly unsafe. The process to get them here is incredibly unsafe. The process to produce them is incredibly unsafe. And the whole market together is just you look at what's going on in Mexico right now. Our war on drugs has created a literal cartel narco state. You have narco states throughout Latin America.
Absolutely. And I want to get into that. But
if you want to pull up some of the statistics on people that have been killed in the drug by the drug cartel.
Well, I don't have that.
We could probably find something during the break that shows it, but
absolutely. Or if you guys in the comment section can get us some statistics, that would really help.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I normally have them off the top of my head, but we're kind of just warming up here.
Right.
I wanted to just lay it out.
So when I say that, I think I don't think you should be violently arrested for buying a BJ while high on cocaine. It's not because that I think either of those are moral acts or good things, but it's because I think the pathology inherent in those things isn't nearly as dangerous or evil as the system you are propping up in the process of that.
In the black market, the black market. Anytime you make something illegal, you create a black market for it. And in this case, it is an incredibly profitable black market. That means that there is so much profit motive to very bad people, because it's a black market. And the difference between a black and a white market is that, at least in a white market where the state is involved, and this is coming from the guy that hates the state, at least in a legal market, there is a very transparent monopoly on violence. There is a set of rules that you can look to and hope to hold them to, whereas in a black market there is no set of rules.
Absolutely.
There is no limiting principle to any of it. It's all about controlling the market, and you have to provide your own violence to sustain it.
Right. Yeah. People can and will continue to do these things, even if it's illegal. And by making it illegal, you don't get rid of it. You simply prop up the drug dealers, the human traffickers, which fosters violence. It creates a black market, which there are no legal and peaceful ways to resolve disputes.
Yeah. And when there is no any legal or peaceful way to resolve the dispute, you get Tijuana, Mexico, you get Juarez, you get what's going on currently down in Colombia, what's going down in Venezuela and Honduras, and all these places that are between the drugs and us. They're all getting destroyed by it too, because that drug trafficking trade is just insane amounts of money. And there's also, like I mentioned before, the added side effect of it. And now you're also dealing with people are going to do these drugs anyways. Now, I don't know if when I have a kid and he's 16 and he decides to go to a party and try cocaine the first time, is he going to die because there's fentanyl in it? Like, I can't necessarily besmirch my child of doing, I'd be disappointed. I'd be like, I asked you to wait till you were a little bit older and make this decision more consensually.
It'd be great if he just never did it. Right.
Yeah, it'd be better if he never did it, but I don't think he deserves to die for doing it once. And for those of you who are unaware, cocaine is usually a very safe drug to do the first time. You're listening to Drug Talk on 1360 KHNC.
So what's up, guys? If you are in the comment section and you're hanging out with my co-patriot, Kevin LaRusso, and myself, the self-flagellating Bucky Dillon, let us know that you're there. Get in the conversation with us. If you think we're totally full of shit, feel free to tell us. You guys are fucking idiots.
Sucky Dillon over there.
Sucky Dillon.
This is a very important issue, and we're seeing the negative effects of it. And I'm traditionally I'm stand on the legal side, but there's also caveats to legalization, and we're going to get into that a little bit. There's quite a bit of nuance here where the people on the left make good points about it, and the people on the right make good points about it. But the answer being somewhere in the middle is a combination of identifying what it is the problem you're trying to solve, and coming up with legitimate solutions that reflect how it can be solved, So, but do we have any comments so far? Any questions from the audience?
Well, Janine is just saying, what's up, guys? She says it's very nice to be here. Janine, it's very nice to be with you.
Yes, always.
Yeah.
We appreciate your continued support of the Liberty Revolt here. We always know that we can count on one person commenting for us. So thank you, Janine. What is it? Yeah, so we're trying here. We're trying to work with local politics, try to get people more involved in this, because if the government schools continue to be run by government bureaucrats, there's literally nothing we're ever going to be able to do. So step one in taking back our country is taking back our cities. You can't, take back your room, take back your house, take back your street. And that's, you got to do it from the ground up. So let's work on taking back our streets, and then we can start taking back our ground. Let's see.
Absolutely. Man, I wish you guys could hear Chris Lewis's constitutional moments. He's great.
We love
Socialism.
around here.
Frederick Bastiat, The Law.
Don't you remember, Lucky? No one wants to hear this. No one cares about this.
I know.
I love how.
And it's funny because Chinese is the only one we didn't have.
I know she brought up Arabic. I was like, well,
now we do. I made this just for Cindy. And I'm going to give her a shout out.
That's Naruto, right?
Huh?
That's Naruto, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dude.
If you guys are in the live stream and you're watching us dance around, it's because we have music in our headphones that is bumming. It's fire. Okay. So
Liberty Revolt on 1360 KHNC, libertyrevoltmedia.com, facebooks.com/Liberty
Revolt Media.
Yeah, there we go.
It's youtube.com/Liberty Revolt.
Yeah.
Yes.
But, I got the plug. Don't worry.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, so by the way, Cindy, that Chinese intro music I made earlier today just for you. She called us out on terrible bump music, and I was deeply offended because number one, she was like, nobody wants to hear that Chinese stuff. And I was like, Chinese is the only one I don't have, lady. First off. Secondly, all of my intro and outro music is the best music on KHNC, and it's not even close.
No, it's not. And it's like, you mentioned the Arabic too, and I was like, well, I speak Arabic, so like, what is? This is no,
yeah.
First and foremost. But to get back to the drug talk, why is this important? It is important because the life years being lost currently to drug overdoses and to drug addiction in our country is outrageous, and the responses, the attempts to address it, have been, well, for the most part, just absolute failures. If you look at San Francisco, if you look at what California is doing, if you look at what a lot of these leftist cities are doing, they're trying to address the issue with compassion, where they're like, no, we're not, you can do your drugs here, we won't arrest you for doing drugs and all this other stuff on the sidewalks. It's not it's not right? And then you have the conservatives that try to be more authoritarian about it, like, no, it's outright illegal, you can't do it at all, kind of deal. Yeah. It's like, well, yeah, but you're saying that if somebody's high on the street, you have the right to initiate something that's going to get them killed, right? What it comes down to is that there are ways to address it that adapt both the compassionate and the strict side of it.
Well, and to top it off, the war on drugs hasn't slowed down the use of drugs.
No.
Drug use in the United States is at all-time highs, and its illegality actually gives it more appeal because it gives it the appeal of being like a counter-cultural kind of thing. That's why all your cool rappers and your musicians, they write songs about it. And here's the thing. By making it illegal, you're de-incentivizing people to seek help with addiction because people are afraid of getting in trouble. And in many cases, you're actually making it illegal for social institutions like churches and other organizations from offering help.
Yeah, and what it comes down to, so there's a Dutch saying. So I was listening recently to Michael Schellenberger talk about this issue, and so he's really big on actually just trying to figure out what is the solution to this, right? So he was over in the Netherlands, and he was working with the Dutch minister on basically drugs, if you will, like, and the way it works in Holland is that you're allowed to do these things, they're decriminalized, but that doesn't mean you're allowed to do it out on the street. That doesn't mean that you get to be high and reckless and breaking property down on the street. It doesn't mean that you're able to actually it doesn't mean that you're allowed to be distributing it openly on the street. No, it's a private thing. If you have it and you have what's considered to be individual consumption levels, you're not going to get arrested for it, right? You might get a ticket depending on where you're at, but you're not going to get arrested for it. Portugal, it's the same thing. However, if you're caught with
that's interesting.
If you're caught on the streets, both these countries, it's decriminalized. People aren't getting in trouble for doing it in their private homes, but if you're doing it out on the streets in Portugal, what happens is that if they catch you and you're like, you either have too much. Well, if you have too much, if they have what to be considered to be like distribution levels, you'll go to jail. Like, that's illegal. But if you're high and you have individual use, You're not going to go to jail, but you're going to be given the option of doing of rehab or jail, right? Your parents get involved, your family, your business, your friends get involved. It basically, like in Portugal, if you're caught high out on the street, and they will only arrest you if you're being a disturbance about it. They basically do a state-mediated intervention. But either way, it comes down. There's this saying in Dutch that he said. He goes, the Dutch approach it like a soft doctor lets wounds fester, right? If you're a good doctor, you're being compassionate and being a doctor for them. But at the end of the day, you're also not you're not being easy on them. You're not saying like, look, I get it,
Right.
You're high, but we're just going to know. It's like, this is wrong or this is bad for you. It's not what is causing you to want to do this kind of stuff. And it actually takes and looks at what can solve this problem and puts it into practice.
Yeah. And people like to associate the violence that is inherent in this war on drugs and these gang wars with the drugs themselves. An example of this is in 1989, an analysis of New York City murder cases found that, contrary to the impression left by politicians and journalists at the time, crack-related homicides were not committed by people under the influence of crack. The vast majority grew out of black market conflict.
Yeah, the drug market, the drug trade itself in America is brutally violent. You have entire cities, you have city blocks, cities, regions of the country dominated. They have like, for instance, the Hells Angels might run the trafficking, and then the MS-13 might run the distribution, and the Bloods and Crips might run the pills, and then one of the Honduran gangs might be running the weed and the heroin kind of deal. It's like, and they're all at all levels. It is violent conflict.
Right. Profits from these businesses strengthen murderous criminal organizations. And it doesn't just do that, but it fosters a distrust of the law. It fosters this gang culture, right? And I think the best example that we can hold up to prove that Kevin and Bucky are absolutely right about this is the prohibition of alcohol. Yeah. What happened in New York City in the 1920s when they made alcohol illegal, right? It was all over, but I'm speaking specifically about New York. Yeah. You had the rise of mob bosses who were petty criminals before, but people didn't stop drinking alcohol. Instead, what happened is they started turning to these gangsters to provide them with alcohol, and these gangsters reinvested it into their criminal enterprise and became mob bosses, and then started buying off politicians, and all of the death and the violence and the political corruption and the atrocities that we saw with the rise of the mob bosses was a direct result of alcohol prohibition.
Exactly. It gave them the power, because the mafia had always really existed. It's always been big in Sicily, but like it never really got the footing that it needed in America. But what prohibition provided was the capital necessary for them to actually be able to invest in the market and take it over because what it also requires is that all these levels, the gangs have to have the monopoly of violence wherever they're distributing, which means that they're putting up a direct fight against police that isn't made any better by the recent spate of leftist rioting against the police. The Ferguson effect that has been going in has only been allowing this to get worse, because now basically these gangs and stuff run cities because the cops aren't going to do anything. They don't want to do anything, or they're not empowered to do anything about it because they've been so weakened. And it's just, all it does is cause the communities most impacted by it to just crumble.
Right. And not only that, it fosters corruption throughout law enforcement. So I'm looking at an example here. In one recent case, an undercover Drug Enforcement Administration agent convinced a drug dealer that he was undercover with to purchase a $43,000 truck, and then busted him and seized the truck for his own use. In another case, a Customs and Border Protection agent was paid by drug traffickers for 10 years to help them facilitate smuggling. Police officers in Philadelphia and Baltimore had a sideline in selling drugs that they seized. And of course, we have the problem of prison guards supplying drugs in prisons.
Yeah, and a lot of that too, because you're going to hear that and you think, yeah, they should be firing these people. But also a part of it is that like these drug traffickers have so much power and so much incentive that the option is usually take the bribe or your family dies. Like they will directly go after your family. Now the DEA guy, he can suck it because that's
Right.
blatantly corrupt. But like there is a lot of times where it's like, hey, help us run these drugs or we'll kill your family. It's easier to just take the money.
Or the drug dealers realize, hey, what is the best way for us to monopolize our little corner of the market? Let's infiltrate the police, and then let's bust all of our rival gangs and drug dealers, and then we will utilize the police as part of our arsenal to support this criminal enterprise.
Yeah, and what it comes down to is that there are multiple studies too that show that, you know, drug addiction itself is a symptom not of just like it's not something that just is inherent to the person. It's a result of a person's broken life. Like, so there are ways to address it where you can legalize, take that power away from the cartels, control the distribution in a way where people who are seeking these drugs out because their lives are broken can also simultaneously be getting the help. The Swiss model, which saw that their heroin epidemic get crushed, saw that you had to go into the clinic, you had to get you could get as much weed or as much heroin as you wanted, but first you had to talk to a career counselor, and you had to talk to a counselor in general, and they had people on standby to discuss like what's going on, and they had organizations, businesses that would put job applications in there and say, hey, look, we know you're addicted to heroin, we want you to come work for us and do that instead. And they saw their drug addiction rates just freaking plummet, because they addressed the root cause of why someone might be addicted to drugs. The state produced it and controlled it. And I know I'm a terrible anarchist on this right now, but if they would be produced by private companies. But you know what? I can put my anarchy aside to actually fix the problem for a second here, because this is an issue that needs to be directly addressed by the people. And if we have the apparatus we have in if I'm just using the apparatus we currently have in place, because that's what we've got. And I would rather solve this issue than bicker about the anarchist solution to it and never get it solved.
Right. I agree. We need to look at the scoreboard, realize that the liberty movement is losing. We're getting stronger, but we're losing. And then we need to look at the cards we have in our hand and say, how do we move the ball down the field? And sometimes I feel like the principled libertarian perfectionists in many ways hold us back. And I'm not saying I think they're right, actually, on most things, but sometimes they dig their heels in when it comes to just utilizing the tools we actually can have and utilize to just move the ball a little bit further down the field.
They do. Well, libertarians, everybody does this. It's you want the perfect,
Absolutely.
You sacrifice the good for the perfect. And you see it on the left all the time. But we must have this. You can't get us part of the way there. You can't get us headed down the right direction. It's basically like you have to teleport there. It's like, no, let's take baby steps. There's a true crisis going on in America. We're not going to have Ancapistan next year, but we can start to move forward to address these issues and start actually helping people's lives, start actually helping people out. And at the end of the day, the clinics I'm talking about can be run by private organizations. They can be run by communities. They can be run by volunteers. The state doesn't have to be involved at all.
Right. We don't have to erect a government apparatus for these things. They can be actually taken care of on a private level.
Yeah, but where the state can get involved in is making it so that you don't get arrested for having drugs on you, making it because, like, at the end of the day, conservatives want less people doing drugs, right? They want less people addicted to drugs. They see the destruction drugs bring out in their community and how terrible it can be, and they're not wrong. They're not wrong that a drug-addicted community is probably broken,
right? And
it's probably going to be high crime. But at the end of the day, there is a way to address the problem of the drug addict, the issue of the drug addict, in a way where you are, probably doing something very Christian and treating them like a human being and actually trying to identify what the problem is, rather than saying,
sure,
you were, ripped out on cocaine, out on the street, so we're going to throw you in a jail cell for a while.
And in so many ways, the war on drugs is driving some of the major factors that conservatives care about, right? Yeah. We hear conservatives talk about police lives matter, and we need to trust our police and work with our police. Well, nothing undermines respect for the law like having a war on drugs that fosters corruption throughout law enforcement, like the examples I just gave you, right?
And so punishes people for quote unquote nonviolent offense or
absolutely. Yeah. So in that same sense, police that are arbitrarily targeting people for victimless crimes and especially if these laws are being implemented in a racially disparate way, if you ended the war on drugs, we wouldn't have a border crisis, right? And we would have far more trust for the police. Let's talk.
I wouldn't necessarily say we wouldn't have a border crisis.
We would
but it
have
be
much less.
Significantly reduced. There would be a lot less problems associated with it. The part of the border crisis wouldn't be that they're packing drugs into human beings and sending them across the border. Part of the drug trafficking problem wouldn't be that the countries that are collapsing because of their narco states would not exist.
Correct.
Correct. Some of those countries are just flat out failing.
Right. But. Yeah. Whether you're on the left and you compare, you want to fix those countries, or you're on the right and you believe that operational control of our border is necessary, ending the war on drugs is a critical way to achieve that.
1360 KHNC.
Revolt.
I'm gonna go get the conservatives' opinion.
Okay, so we have some comments from Tracy. Tracy says, "Why is it so much more expensive when legalized?" I can tell you it's not. Marijuana was legalized here in Colorado, and the value of marijuana, or the price of marijuana, has plummeted, and the quality of marijuana has gone way. I can't. The reason I don't smoke pot anymore is because Colorado marijuana got way too strong.
Let me put it this way: not that I partake in marijuana, of course, but let's just put it this way: the weed that you get for $35 an eighth now cost about $70 an eighth when I was in high school. So it's like the quality has skyrocketed. Everything has gotten better.
Okay, and then she says there are no treatment options for smoking. Well, again,
actually, I'm going to get into that.
I don't think that's true.
No. The evidence is mushrooms. So microdosing on mushrooms has shown they're still getting peer reviewed and the research is still new. 80+% success rate in getting people to quit smoking cigarettes.
I can attest to that.
Yeah, it's microdosing. It's not like doing an eighth of shrooms. It's a psychologist controlled experiment where they give you a very just enough to get you the experience. It's a controlled amount in a controlled environment. But ecstasy has shown to have an incredibly high success rate, or MDMA has shown an incredibly high success rate at solving PTSD, and mushrooms have shown an incredibly high success rate at ending addiction. What's the conservative opinion of our discussion?
You better hurry. The commercial break's going to be over very quickly.
So we're doing a much more respectful job.
Oh yes, absolutely.
I'm watching these guys.
You're doing great.
We have our in-house Republicans across the way from us, and we're laughing with them, having a good time. The Red Rift, 1360 KHNC. We hope you guys give them a listen. And by the way, I want to give a shout out to Corey Lewis in Meet America. Man, she sponsored beef for one of our recent events, and I will say it's fantastic. If you guys are in Colorado, I think we might actually be able to ship the beef around.
Find out.
Yeah, no, I know. I heard we could ship it to Arizona. So hey, doesn't matter where in the country you are. If you want some fantastic Colorado local beef, no chemicals, no hormones, no antibiotics, great grass-fed beef, super tasty, get a hold of me because I can give you guys the hookup.
Yep.
Wow.
So yeah, microdosing.
Chairman here.
Microdosing on psychedelics, they found really high success rates. It's very preliminal, but in veterans, MDMA, ecstasy, microdosing has shown to be incredibly effective at limiting PTSD. And psilocybin or psychedelic shrooms has shown incredible success
with nicotine addiction.
Yeah, like people talk about how they took it one time and at the end they never wanted a cigarette again.
I'm wondering who our sound guy is waving at.
He's saying bye to Austin and Evan.
Are they out of here? Kimakase. Oh, Tracy wants to know about CBD. I can tell you guys, and this actually lines up perfectly. I wanted to go to CBD anyways. All right, so we were talking about the alcohol prohibition, right? Henry Anslinger was the head of the Federal Bureau of Drugs and Narcotics when alcohol prohibition was put into place. Now, what did this do for the government agency? Thomas Sowell pointed out that government agencies have their own profit incentive. Everyone who works in that agency wants to keep their job. And so insofar as they solve the problem, they don't solve their job. Insofar as they exaggerate the problem, they can collect more money, right? So
their incentive is proving that they
are justified.
Justifying their existence. That's what it is.
Right. And so here's what happened. You had Henry Anslinger, who wanted to justify after the end of Prohibition, because it obviously didn't work out, which I assume the war on drugs, hopefully, I mean, Prohibition only lasted 17 years. This war on drugs is going way too long. We're like, wait, we are like 60 years into this, right?
Drugs has just a massive lead at this point. Like, it's basically like watching an NBA team beat down on like a JV girls basketball team right now.
Oh, dude, it's like watching LeBron James just dunking on chicks.
Like he's playing toddlers at this point. It's ridiculous because at the end of the day, we get it. We get why you tried it. You know, there's the classic thought of, hey, if we just prevent it, make it illegal, and punish it, like that'll do it. That's not how it works.
Okay,
so there is some level of having to punish people for having it, but that goes only so far as public areas and when other people are potentially being threatened by it,
or when people who are on drugs are committing crimes.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Anyways, so he wanted to justify this massive bloated budget for the bureaucracy and its law enforcement apparatus that it had to prop up, because you need a lot of police to stop rural Americans from getting drunk, right? Or city, I guess, stop Americans from getting drunk.
Here's how successful the alcohol guys were. We actually have a sport built around them running from the cops and running alcohol. That's NASCAR for all you folks.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no. The origins of NASCAR were the rednecks the hillbillies that would soup their cars up to get away from the police, to run moonshine and stuff like that. They would be chased by cops, and so they would have to tune it up. And the first NASCAR races happened slowly after the end of Prohibition, because like all these guys had these cars and they wanted to do something with them, so they started.
Did you know the Kennedy family originally got rich by smuggling whiskey from Ireland?
Oh yeah. The Kennedy family was very big in the mob. Yep.
Anyways, so in order to try to enforce these prohibition laws, they had to get a tremendous amount of funding for this bureaucracy. And then when they ended it, obviously they wanted to justify their thing. So they went after the next big drug. That was cannabis, marijuana.
Well, are you going to get into the William Randolph Hearst aspect of
it? Yes. And so, obviously when the state wants to justify itself and its endeavors, who does it team up with? The opinion shapers in society.
Exactly,
right?
The elites.
William Randolph Hearst Sr. had the largest network of newspapers in the country, and he was against cannabis because the hemp paper industry was posing a threat to his investment in wood paper mills, right? Because he was trying to get paper for his newspapers, and he could not compete.
It wasn't just paper; they were starting to discover turning marijuana fibers into basically 2x4s. That's when the technology. So it wasn't just paper he was worried about; it was that hemp was going to replace wood.
Oh yeah, and here's the thing: it's super hard to centralize and monopolize that because anybody can grow it. Hemp is not like a tree that takes 30 years to sprout, right? You can grow hemp in your backyard, right? You can grow it in your basement. I did it, folks.
And by the way, the hemp plant has zero THC or CBD or anything like that on it.
True.
It's just a plant.
So Henry Anslinger teamed up with William Randolph Hearst, and they used his massive sway over the media via his newspaper industry to put out all kinds of propaganda about marijuana. In fact, marijuana isn't even cannabis. The word marijuana comes from a Mexican weed, but they were able to harness white racism that existed in the day to make marijuana use synonymous with Black and Mexican culture, and then use that to try to foster the notion that we needed to make marijuana illegal.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep. The word marijuana itself was specifically chosen so that
they could associate it with Mexicans.
Yep. And so it was like it was the reefer madness. It was very clearly it was one of the greatest examples of regulatory capture by an industry, and it's basically fascism at that point, right? And so they worked together, they got it made illegal, and they've been using it to ruin lives. Like the war on drugs, the amount of men that have been taken away from their children because they were high on the street rather than actually having the problem addressed, but they were just thrown in jail. It's these things have incredibly negative consequences on communities. And when we say victimless crime, we're not advocating that people should be able to shoot up on the streets like in San Francisco and just get high on the streets. No, if you're doing that on the streets, yeah, you are going to get arrested because you should. We're talking about the privacy of your own home, right? There is no reason why when you're in your home and you want to do heroin or something, you should have your door kicked down and a gun put in your face. Like, how dare you do something that might kill you? Here, let us put something in your face that will kill you. Like, there is the honest to God's truth about it is you send these people off who somebody got caught with too much weed. You are now putting him in a prison where he's going to get raped. He's going to get assaulted. He's going to get beaten. He's going to you are introducing so much extra horrible things into their life over nothing, what amounts to nothing. And you're not even addressing the problem because now this person's been to prison. He's had all these terrible things. You think he's going to come out a better person than when he went in? And you already decided that going in, he was a bad person. So now,
absolutely.
Yeah.
What happens when you put a human being in a prison system, and the only people around him are prison guards or other criminals? What do? They sit there and they talk about all their criminal activities and how they could, they think about them, they get new ideas, right? They coordinate with each other. Then they get out and they commit even more crimes. That's why we need to stop. And here's the thing with the victimless crimes in general. Victimless crimes seems to me like a way for the state to victimize everybody by forcing us to subsidize their violence and force wielding apparatus.
It's the state acknowledging that they don't want you to have bodily autonomy. It's because, at the end of the day, you should be allowed to put whatever into your own body that you want to. But if I want to chew cyanide, I should be allowed to just chew cyanide. I know it'll kill me. I have the right? Like, I have bodily autonomy. The sanctity of life requires that we try to do everything we can to save a person's life, right? And so, you want to discourage people from doing that kind of stuff, and most people aren't going to want to. But at the end of the day, when you say victimless crime, that's a very fancy way of saying you did something to yourself that we don't like.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So explain to me, why should someone not be allowed to shoot up on the street corner?
Because at the end, that's the public domain. We're talking, you can do private property and public property.
Okay, but what's wrong with it?
I will let you know when we get back. You are listening to the Liberty Revolt on 1360
KHNC. In fiscal year 2020. Testing. 1, 2. I just want to read this to you. In fiscal year 2020, the ATF had 5,082 employees, including 2,653 special agents and 760 industry operations investigators. Its 2020 acknowledged budget enacted was approximately $1.4 billion.
1.4. Their budget is $1.4 billion.
Mm-hmm.
Funny, because I would get rid of them literally on the first day I was in office if I ever got elected. I'd be like, that'll save us.
Yeah, I'm going to look it up. How much money have we spent on the war on drugs?
It's tens of billions, man. Maybe hundreds. I have a freaking splinter in my finger that I've just been dying to get out for days.
There's a razor blade in the desk out there.
What?
There's a razor blade in the desk out there.
Nah.
In 2015, the Drug Policy Alliance, which advocates for an end to the war on drugs, estimated that the United States spends $51 billion annually on these initiatives. And in 2021, after 50 years of the drug war, others have estimated that the U.S. has spent an accumulative $1 trillion on it. And this is only the on the books funding, right? We all know that it's very hard to win a war when you're funding both sides of it.
Yep, Iran-Contra. You had like the CIA was smuggling drugs through Bill Clinton's Arkansas, man. Bill Clinton was governor of Arkansas when George H.W. Bush's CIA was smuggling drugs through Arkansas into inner cities, creating the crack epidemic.
Corey David. Kavika Bertholet is in the live stream chat. He says, "Oh my, I popped on and was asked to attach a COVID-19 fact sheet." On Liberty Revolt posts. Yeah, you should probably do that. We need good comedic material.
I got it out.
Nice. Liberty Revoto. Testing. $51 billion a year. That's what the United States government spends on the war on drugs. In its 50 years, it's estimated that we have spent $1 trillion. Now, I know that's nothing to Joe Biden.
My Lord. That's drugs won, baby. Drugs freaking slaughtered. No, it's astronomical just how much money has been devoted to this. Obviously, there is something to be said for the fact that you don't want drugs going into schools. You don't want drugs getting around children. But you know what? It definitely does right now. And I bet a lot of it has to do with that. There's literally zero oversight on the trade because guess what? It's illegal. So there is no documentation. There is no documenting it. There is no being able to track it and see where any of it's going.
Oh, absolutely. Kind of like gain of function funny.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's so weird, by the way, Fire Fauci. No,
Let's go, Brandon.
You asked me before let's go, Brandon. You asked me before the break, though, why shooting up on the streets is bad. And it's bad because, again, what we're talking about is the right of a person to do what they want in their own private property or in someone else's private property that gives them permission, right? It's consenting. But when you're sitting out on the streets, when you're doing it out in the public sphere, out in the public domain, that just, it's first and foremost, if the people don't want it, they have every right to say you can't do that. Because again, if you're in a community, the community does get to have a say on the things that the community uses together. And so doing drugs on the street, encouraging people to leave, to be out on the street ends up with like trash on the street, ends up with more people out on the street doing it because it's mostly the homeless that are going to be doing it on the street or they'd be incredibly destitute. And at the end of the day, if you're doing it out on the street like that, it's a big signifier that the problem has gotten out of control. And when the problem's out of control, just allowing it to continue again, the goal is to help people get off drugs. If you can't manage to stay in your own home, that's a sign that things have gotten a little, or stay in a private, say if you go to a bar and they say it's okay, fine. But if you're sitting out on the street shooting up heroin, it has gone out of control. You have lost all control. And the best thing we can do to help you is give you an option. Either you agree to the terms of treatment, wherein you have to go see a counselor, you have to see a psychologist, you have to see a jobs advisor, or something where you have involvement in your life, or you get to go to jail. Because you're not allowed to sit out in the street and do it. And there is something to be said for the fact that putting a drug addict in jail, and if we can, again, if you are able to actually address the issue and make it so that prison guards aren't involved in the drug trade anymore, right, and get a tighter grip on it. A lot of people go out on the streets, they get arrested, they could put in a jail where they don't have access to drugs, and because most of them don't. Drugs are incredibly expensive in prison. There was very high rates of people, getting off of drugs, right? And some people it would change them, some people it wouldn't. But at the end of the day, you get them clean. And what happens is people get clean and then they get thrown back on the streets, and then there's never any follow-up, and they end up relapsing and getting high again. But what it comes down to is you can't just say that there's no punishment for it. You're allowed to responsibly use it. That's the law. You are legally, with every right comes a responsibility. And you're allowed to responsibly use it, which means you're doing it in the privacy of either your home or a private establishment that allows it. Doing it on the streets in front of children, in front of people, no, that's not okay. And a community has the right to say that is not allowed. And if you're going to break that, then you have to seek treatment because we actually care about you and we want you off drugs. And you do the Portuguese system of basically the forced intervention, which requires you to confront your entire social structure and actually come up with a plan of how you're going to get clean. It seems to work a lot better than our system of either allow full-blown not doing anything about it or full-blown just throwing them in jail for years.
I'm still on the fence with the not doing it on public. I'm struggling to come up with a principled reason as to why that's a problem that doesn't have crossover into other things, like say, I don't know.
Yeah, no,
I don't know.
It's the public.
Should the public? I mean, I guess we have nudity laws. They're similar.
I think that if a community doesn't want to allow nudity, the community has the right to say no. You can't just walk around naked. But if a community wants to be a nudist colony, they have that right too.
What if the community decides that they don't want black people using a water fountain?
Then you know what? They have the right to say that. And you know what's going to happen? They're going to suck, because especially in today's day and age, that's something that would lead to a faltering community. At the end of the day, people have a right to be racist. Like that's just the fact of the matter is people have a right to be assholes. As long as they're not actively hurting someone, as long as they're not actively going out and doing personal harm to them, it's like, now if they can't, it's the freedom of association. The idea that you get to choose who you associate with. Do you have that right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Whose rights am I violating by shooting up on the street?
You are violating my right to keep that kind of stuff away from my children. You are violating the public's right to not have to deal with that in public.
Okay. What if somebody wants to ban, say, the Colorado flag?
I mean, if it's a community that does it, then like they have, this is, as long as the people.
Do you think I should be able to be arrested because my community doesn't think I should wave that flag?
Are we talking in Ancapistan?
I'm just asking you.
Yeah, no. So depending on the makeup of the state, if you're going by what the Constitution says, no, they have no right to say that. But if you're going by whether or not it's a consenting community based on my personal ideals, yeah, the community has a right to say it. I just wouldn't live in that community. I wouldn't want to live in a community that says that kind of stuff. The community has every right to say, yeah, you're allowed to shoot up on the street, but the community also has every right to say, no, you're not. And we're consenting to this. And if you want to do drugs in our community, you have to follow the rules behind it. If you're on your own private property, do whatever the hell you want. That's fine. But if you're out here in our shared spaces, in our shared commons, where our children are, where we are, where we're trying to, we have, you're allowed to, a community is allowed to demand decency. And in fact, it's the community's refusal to demand decency that is allowing these places to fall apart.
Who decides decency? The community or the
yes.
individual?
The individual can think what they want to do is decent or not, but they're consenting to being out in the public. So therefore, they have to sit with, if they don't like those rules, you again have your private property. You have places you can go. But at the end of the day, the community has the right to dictate terms of decency. And if their goal is to help, then just letting them do it in the streets isn't the answer. You're listening to Liberty Revolt on 1360 KHNC.
All right, now we're going to drag this back to the war on drugs. That is interesting. It almost makes us want to get back into the what is consent? How does this, almost that conservative versus libertarian kind of argument again.
Well, if you're on your private property and I bring my child over and you shoot up heroin, you can't throw me off. Like. Sure. Like I'm on my private property, your answer is to leave. But if we're out on the streets, out in the public, out in a park, and you're deciding to shoot up heroin, no. If that is against the community guidelines, no public use of drugs, which again, without the state, absent the state, the local city government, that's a consenting agreement. You moved into that area. You have the right to do whatever you want on your own private property. But once you enter the community limits, you have to abide by the community rules. And they have the right to set those up. They have the right to have consensual rules. Because again, those rules only apply in the shared spaces. You can find a place that doesn't have those rules somewhere else.
Okay, so are we then, by participating and by our very presence in the United States, consenting to all of these rules?
No, because this is.
we could leave.
No, this is an entirely different situation, right? I'm talking in Ancapistan. I'm talking based on principle. If we're talking by the United States government and the U.S. Constitution, I do believe you have the right to do whatever you want on private property, so long as you're not violating another person's rights non-consensually. And that we do have laws and we do have law and order. The problem is the state. And that's why there's a difference between a government and a state. A state is whatever force wields the monopoly on violence. In my system, each individual has.
I mean,
the
I think
monopoly of
it could
violence
be
in their own
publicly
lives.
discouraged, but I'm having a hard time seeing why it is not in some way a violation of
doesn't
the
help.
principle of self-ownership and the principle
Because
of
they don't
free
own that
expression.
land. They don't own that land more than anyone else.
Man, we got the jams. All right, the war on drugs is destroying countries on the southern side of the border, right? So whether you are a liberal who has compassion and wants to fix the circumstances on the southern side of the border, or you're a conservative who believes that we need to have operational control of our border, the war on drugs is deriving so much of the border crisis because those cartels are profiting off of it.
Yep.
I mean, where do you think the cartels are getting their money? They're getting their money from smuggling drugs and smuggling human beings. And most of the human beings that are being smuggled out are desperate people trying to escape the cartel state.
They're smuggling
right?
three things: drugs, guns, and bodies. That's what they're smuggling right now.
And where do you think distrust of the police is higher? There, in the places in the United States where we have the war on drugs, or in places where drugs are legal?
Definitely in America where they're not. There's higher. I mean, if you look at the narco states, there's no trust in the police. They tell you don't trust any of the police officers there. They're all probably bought
It's a
off.
shakedown.
Yeah, but if you're looking in the Netherlands, if you're looking at Portugal, if you're looking at Switzerland, if you're looking at any of these places that have some semblance of like relaxed drug policies, now decriminalization is one thing, but like the war on drugs has caused, like you're saying, so many just deeply penetrating problems that go just beyond whether or not the individual is doing the drugs. The communities are being destroyed. Countries have been destroyed by this. Like you said, there's communities most affected by the war on drugs here in America are the ones with the lowest trust of police. And
absolutely.
And it's like we ignore these issues and we try to pretend that they don't exist or that they're not. That the treatment somehow actually wasn't worse, and it's like, no, this is much like COVID. The war on drugs was a treatment for the problem that went way beyond actually solving the problem.
Oh, absolutely. And even though we have like 11 states now that have been legalizing cannabis, the war on drugs has never been more ferocious, right? There were more arrests in 2018 than there were in 2017, despite all the states legalizing cannabis.
Yeah. And it comes down to the fact that it's the same way we're looking at the drug trade is the same way the conservatives look at the gun thing, though. But it's like when you talk to conservatives about it, their response to why you can't make guns illegal is like, well, look, guns still get into criminals' hands. It's like, okay, now let's do drugs. All right.
Yeah.
Like,
right. Yeah.
That's
interesting.
It's like, yes, you create a black market that only makes the problem worse and only affects more people. These victimless crimes no longer become victimless because now the process to get the drugs to that person's pocket probably led to someone getting trafficked, someone getting shot, somebody getting they're getting the drugs into that problem. The reason why you can point to a victim is because you, the government, created the victims, and it's not the person you're arresting.
Right.
They are not the victim.
The result of the black market criminal industry that is propped up by the illegalization of whatever this product is, whether it's guns or whether it's drugs, causes a lot more victimization and pathologies in society than drugs and guns would in the first place.
Yeah. Drugs and guns.
Drugs and guns and guns and drugs and drugs and guns.
But like, it comes down to the fact that again,
now we're talking.
Yeah, no, we're almost done here too. We gotta start.
Wait till we get on prostitutes.
Guys, we are going to be talking about this issue some more coming up because we are basically out of time. What it comes down to is that the answer to the drug problem is a simultaneous legalization while maintaining a strict restriction on public use. That's the way you start, and there's a lot more to this. I'm currently reading San Francisco by Michael Schellenberger. It's a great book on it, great topic. Don't forget your local elections coming up next Tuesday. Bucky,
Free State, Colorado, 663,000 marijuana arrests in 2018. You guys are listening to the Liberty Revolt right here on 1360 KHNC. KHNC.
The
Roar of the Rockies. By the way, keep your headphones on. Listen to this next commercial. Listen, just listen.
Perfect. Hey, thank you for those of you who have been listening to the live stream. Thank you so much for sticking with us today. I hope this has been a great show. We're going to keep talking about the drug problem in America here.
Public use, because I actually don't really see that. Like, I'm struggling to figure out the problem here.
You're struggling to see the problem in San Francisco? That's the issue. Is San Francisco,
I think San Francisco has a lot more problems than just that.
Has taken the libertarian approach to it, which is just let it happen, and we have seen the problem. I'm not so stupid that I'm going to deny it. Like, I'm not saying you are, but in my anarchist view, I'm not going to deny the direct evidence that contradicts the principle that I would hold. Because that shows that the principle that I would hold, where you should be allowed to do it in public, clearly does not work and leads to a worsening community. So on that list, well, anarchism is actually not the correct answer.
But don't you think there's, why pass a law? Don't you think there's social ways of addressing that?
No, there are, but you can't just give people the carrot. It has to be the carrot and the stick. Because if you just give people the carrot, then there's no reason for them to ever actually address the issue. And drug use, beyond the single use where you do it for a fun night out, is a sign of someone that needs help. And if you want to actually address it and improve the issue, because the people that are going to be doing it in public like that, they're not the ones who are going to be responsible about it, clearly. And once you don't have that, their actions are directly bringing down the rest of the area. They are directly impacting the lives of everyone around them now. San Francisco is a hellhole, is an absolute hellhole. You cannot say that public use on the streets has not directly impacted San Francisco.
That sounds like an HOA pitch to me.
Well, HOAs I think are legal, and they're
I'm letting you know, Kevin, the Liberty Revolt is officially an anti-HOH organization. One of my original missions for the Liberty Revolt was actually to be an anti-HOA consultant and like have a national radio show where people would call in me and tell me the horror stories they're dealing with their HOA, and I could give them that.
HOAs is that they're voluntary.
Yes and no. Yes and no.
When you buy a house, you get the HOA rules. You get to know about
HOAs can also prop up, and they can also change with time.
Yeah, no, that's another. But that's
it's interesting.
Issue.
Yeah, there's a lot of things.
Like a government,
right? Honestly, I want to join my HOA because I figure if I can't beat it, I might as well be the Ron Swanson of the HOA and just like have a gigantic approval stamp that I could just slap on everybody's idea.
You get involved by being like, when the HOA is getting out of control, just rallying your community, being like, all right, I'm tired of the HOA, you're tired of the HOA. Like, I just need one other person with me. Let's take this over.
I think my first legislative agenda as the Weld guy here is going to be getting signatures on the ballot to make it that Kevin's voice is considered a public nuisance.
Yes.
And in all public spaces, Kevin is not allowed to speak.
Oh yes, that would be great.
It is communism the moment you step off your property.
Yes. You know what I'll do? I'll buy a property right in the middle of town and put a bunch of loudspeakers up on it and make it so my voice can be heard.
Thanks for hanging out with us, guys. I hope you have the most